conduct this parliamentary inquiry into abuse in specialist disability services in the state. And that inquiry was conducted under the chairpersonship of Marie Edwards, and that report was tabled in two parts. The second part of that was tabled 6 months ago. So our response today is acknowledgement of the great work that Marie and her committee did in forensically getting to the heart of what drove so much of the unacceptable behaviour that we've seen in specialist disability services for many, many years. And we do this, of course, in the context of the background of the rollout of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and to make sure that that voice of people with disabilities is at the centre of a system whereby choice and control can only mean something if there is set against a rigorous background of rights and enforceable rights for people with a disability in the system to make sure that the goals of the NDIS are achieved. And I can thank Marie, and I can thank the advocates, John McKenna from Valid, and George is a long-term disability activist in too many roles to announce here. And I'll get them to say something after I've finished. But the key thesis underlying this response is the Andrews government is taking a zero-tolerance approach to abuse in disability services. To do otherwise is to be disrespectful of the rights of people with a disability, and it is to be to break the commitment that we made that the National Disability Insurance Scheme rollout has to be based on the tightest and best possible regulatory and support system. We'll be doing that by not just adopting either directly or over time as the NDIS works out the recommendations in Marie's report, but we will also be funding now $6 million worth of new measures immediately to give voice to those communities. We'll be making sure also that this is built on the $26 million that we invested in the workforce strategy last month, and this also builds on the Premier's announcement of 2 weekends ago that we will introduce Australia's first accreditation and standards agency for the disability sector. So our $6 million that we're rolling out today to support the first tranche of these recommendations goes to things like making sure that there is a new client incident management systems report, and the $1 million that will go with that. Marie's report showed that some areas are still reporting incidents via fax machines and via inadequate technology that in the 21st century either isn't working or slows down the system in such a way so as to effectively mean that it doesn't work. We will also be further investing a further $1.5 million in support for advocacy groups such as those who are with us here today to make sure that people in the specialist disability accommodation wider system have their voice heard, because you cannot have a rights-based National Disability Insurance Scheme unless at the heart of it you have empowered and supported people with disability in charge. And we will be making sure that those opportunities to support people with disabilities as running their own lives, which is the promise that we've made, is supported through advocacy services. We will also be increasing the powers of the Disability Services Commissioner, who has been a key part of Marie's report, highlighted some of the difficulties the Disability Services Commissioner had when it came to own motion powers and to, of course, to funding the demands of inquiries and reports that he is required to make into disability abuse claims. And we will also be increasing further support to the community visitor program, which is delivered through the Office of the Public Advocate. And we will also be expanding and growing the disability exclusion worker scheme. Because what we want to send is a clear message that if you think abusing people with disability is somehow acceptable in our system, then you are wrong. There is no place for you in the Victorian or indeed the Australian disability system if you carry out abuse against people with a disability. All of these measures are funded, all of these measures will be rolled out immediately, and they all need to be seen as part of the architecture of delivering a national disability insurance scheme. And I'll just perhaps finish by urging the federal government, Minister Porter and the Prime Minister, to come to the COAG meeting in December and make sure that the many challenges that the rollout of the National Disability Insurance Scheme face are overcome, and to stop the choking of resources that the NDIA, as the agency that's delivering the system, is facing. What we've seen in the northeastern suburbs as the rollout occurs is inadequate plans, inadequate consultation and inadequate support. We know from Barwon and from Hunter in New South Wales that a properly supported rollout makes people's lives better. And what we've yet to see in the northeast before we start to roll out across the rest of the state starting next year is that same level of commitment. Part of that commitment is this framework of rights and support for people with disability, but part of it is also to make sure that the Commonwealth delivers on their part of the program of supporting and funding the rollout of the NDIS program. This is a good day. This is a good day for so many people who have fought long and hard to shine the light on unacceptable behaviour in our disability support system. And what this is another step on the path of is making sure that people with disability have the right to an ordinary life just like everybody else. But they have to make sure that they've got the support that the state and the community brings to that system to enable them to do that. And I'm very pleased that Marie has delivered the report and that the government has both accepted overwhelmingly the architecture of that report as a key part of rolling out the National Disability Insurance Scheme over the next 3 years. I might ask John, followed by George perhaps, to say a few words before we go to Marie. John is the Vice President.
No, I'm just one of the team from Valid. And on behalf of Valid, we are very excited about this news. We believe it's a very empowering step for people with disabilities, especially people with intellectual disabilities. Valid is a leading peak organisation who does some great things, has some great initiatives that really works on culture, families and people with disabilities themselves, so they know darn well it's not right to be abused, and this funding is really going to help us a lot to make it all happen. The sorts of things that come across our desk is horrific, and we are so excited that this is going to allow our staff and our initiatives to continue, because it is all about a culture change, getting the right people, having the right fit when it comes to supporting people with disabilities and not forgetting their families. Not all of this support and abuse happens in service providers. It can happen in a person's home also. So it's really good, and we spend a lot of time and invest a lot of effort into empowering people with disabilities to say that's not on, it's not going to happen. And once again, thank you, Minister, for the opportunity. I think it's great.
No worries, John. George?
I'd like to say that I feel very lucky to be a citizen of Victoria today. We are very lucky that we have a minister who supports people with disabilities. I'm sad to say that this is not the case in other parts of Australia, and we are seeing other ministers washing their hands of their responsibilities to people with disabilities. But we have a minister that has our back and is investing more into ensuring that people with disabilities are less likely to suffer abuse and neglect. What I would also like to say though is more funding to ensure that people with disabilities themselves understand what their rights are. The sad situation is that there are a lot of people who don't know how to speak, who are too often in situations where they're abused and they have no idea what to do. That is a real area of learning. have to sit on justice.
And I might just perhaps ask Marie, as the chair of the Family and
Community Development
Committee of the Victoria
It's a bit of a
Parliament.
mouthful. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Minister Foley and the Premier for accepting the majority of the recommendations that we put forward through this inquiry. And I want to especially thank all of those people who came to our public hearings, many people with disabilities, and those who also put in written submissions to our inquiry. It was their voices that challenged us to make these recommendations. I think this probably is an Australian first in terms of support for people with disabilities to ensure that abuse ends, and I think that here in Victoria we have set the bar very high, and I think that we need to send a message to the federal government to follow our lead and to immediately put in place a national quality and standards framework for the NDIS to ensure that all people across Australia who have disabilities are protected, because at the moment here in Victoria it's basically where you will be protected, and we have now got a zero tolerance approach to disability abuse in disability services, and that's the way it should be. This was a very challenging inquiry. It was hard to hear some of the stories of abuse. We want that to end, and thanks now to Minister Foley accepting the recommendations. We hope that we will see an end to abuse in disability services against people with disabilities right here in Victoria.